Two things before I start. I am a member of the anti-PowerPoint party. So you will have no PowerPoint on the screen coming from this side, although I appreciate, of course, all the rest I saw this morning. But I'm an old-fashioned man, so I do not have a PowerPoint. First point. Second, well, my mother tongue being Dutch and French, I have to speak English. You have to bear with my, I think, poor English, but the interpreters I listen to from Russian into English are perfect. Bravo, youngsters. And the third point is to thank the organizers of this forum for having accepted my somewhat provocative title, The Importance of Being Earnest About Translation and Interpretation, Oscar Wilde. The importance of taking translation and interpretation seriously, in other words, seriously by the clients, by the language providers, and by the businesses. Stop the makers of literal translation who, by rendering every word, weaken the meaning, and by doing so, we can say that the latter kills and the spirit gives life. Ladies and gentlemen, this quote goes back to 1734 to Voltaire in his major opus entitled Lettres philosophiques. This quote from 278 years ago from the famous French writer who corresponded with your imperial courts in French, by the way. So this quote sounds obsolete for some probably. To me, it sounds rather very, very to the point and accurate in a world of accelerating multilingual communication, as knowledge and business know no borders in this flat world, as Friedman wrote. Multilingual communication implies the use of different tongues, and since the stakeholders involved in this communication process do not master all the languages to perfection, there is no universal lingua franca in translation and interpretation. The organizers of this forum in Kazan were right to focus on the importance of taking the profession seriously, as I added, as well as the master training programs and universities leading up to these. Translating and interpreting is an art, a profession, unfortunately, not legally protected until now, at least not in Europe and in our countries. Probably not here either. It is an art and it cannot be left in the hands of amateurs or dilettantes. To pass from one language into another presupposes knowledge. To transmit sense, intent, and tone solicits intelligence, as Professor Seleskovic in the Sorbonne used to say. These qualifications can only be obtained and achieved through academic training and lifelong learning in the first place. Translating is an art in looking behind the words, to logic, to cultural concepts, to psychology, not to a mechanical transposition of words from one language into the other. This is why companies, administrations, and businesses, aware of the added value offered by these intellectual performances, fine-tuning documents, contracts, and laws, should reward them accordingly. quality comes at a price, as we all know. Yes, I know machine-assisted translation and the so-called automatic translation, and we have perfect examples, is around the corner. And voice recognition produces already standard sentences and expressions, but not yet the circumvolutions of an ongoing multilingual debate, inaudible accents, or linguistically flawed speakers. But never say never. Indeed, I discovered here in Moscow with some friends that iPads produce already handy translations in writing and in voice. But foggy texts sometimes voluntarily are maintaining this ambiguity for political and diplomatic reasons, don't forget that. And murky interpretation blur the shades and the nuances in the argumentation, lead to misunderstanding, loss of time, and possibly diplomatic and political hardship, bringing stakeholders to court ultimately. New technology used in the training programs and the professions are welcome. We do not prepare for the challenges of tomorrow with the methods of yesterday, but I would say, and would be pleased to keep the seasoned professionals at bay's end, trained as they are through the rigorous apprenticeship of life and learning without IT. It's my opinion. If some might think all these words are theory, I advise them to read the publications of the European Commission on the European language industry, representing a total turnover of 8.7 billion euros in 2009 for activities involving translation, interpretation, editing, publishing, proofreading, film dubbing, multilingual video conferencing, development of virtual platforms, etc., etc. This theory, quote unquote, is based on experience that we gathered in Brussels over 50 years, we must say, of translating and interpretation exercises, or call it business. It really proves that from the 4 official languages we had at the start and now 23 official languages, that we have some knowledge of what happens really in the mind of people, in their thinking and in their writing, since we used to put that in all the languages per day, 2,000 translators at work, plus a 40% of freelancers, 700 interpreters per day at work, and more or less 60 meetings per day, and the translators producing 1,500,000 pages translation in a year. I look forward to discuss with you in detail in the panels over these days all the parameters involved, keeping in mind the training models for interpreters and translators, the use of IT in the learning processes and in practice, the trade-off between cost and quality, the cost of inaccurate or even absence of translation and interpretation, new needs for public service interpreters. It was called community interpreter, and I accept that gladly by my predecessor here. So for administration purposes, for hospitals, for courts, due to the migration flows in the world. And finally, maybe the Russian language industry as a whole. So let me say you this, ladies and gentlemen. Language characterizes the individual and is part and parcel of our culture. Our mother tongue, that precious instrument so often dilapidated and forgotten, is one element in the gigantic puzzle of multilingualism with more than 600 idioms in the world. Languages and their impact on society in human relations should be taken seriously indeed. Words, phrases, formulae, and nuances are the cornerstones of communication and understanding. The translator and the interpreter, the go-between, the facilitator, the lifelong learner must stay in tune with the constantly and rapidly changing world on all levels. Also when it comes to using IT, we do not prepare, as I said, the challenges of tomorrow with the methods of yesterday, and cloud sourcing and intercomprehension in interpretation and translation, or indeed recent new approaches to be developed to enhance the efficiency in our work. The translator and the interpreter are the custodians of pure language when it comes to law and order. They are the heralds of mother tongue. They are standard setters in normative linguistics. Their work should be rewarded and considered accordingly. It is only when something goes wrong, and we have examples in history that brought us to war, unfortunately, it's only when offense is taken, when misunderstanding occurs, that attention is paid on quality language use. So I think we can indeed not leave these things just in the hands of perfect technicians and, as I said, maybe amateurs or dilettantes. Since the professions are not legally protected, everybody can have a plaque at its door and say, I am a certified, maybe even not certified, interpreter or translator. Balancing cost with quality is a delicate trade-off in the era of language services, we know that. But to give in on quality is even worse and can lead to costly misunderstandings, waste of time, business losses, and diplomatic and political hardship. We have examples of this. The final question could be, what is the cost of non-translation? In Commissioner Figel's high-level group on multilingualism in Europe, I was a member of, a first analysis of the use, the utility, or the absence of language knowledge in medium or small companies in the UK using English only revealed that they lost up to 17% in business by missing access to the international tenders due to absence of translation. Replacing all languages by a lingua franca, be it an artificial one, to avoid cost, as some might suggest, is just a mere fata morgana. This could be further discussed in the workshops, along with the question of clear speak, clear writing, which should normally preceded by clear thinking, at least I hope. So, ladies and gentlemen, if Amadou Hampâté Bâ, probably unknown to you, to me also, until I worked in Africa, precisely on the same programs to set up master training programs for I's and T's. It is a writer from Mali. He is an ethnologist. He is a diplomat, and he is also a translator. He said for himself that he was raised in the shadows of the baobab trees. I was not. So I wanted to learn more about your culture and your literature and your history, and I had to read your Dostoevskys, your Turgenevs and Tolstoys and many others through translation that I appreciated much. I'm quite sure that that will be the future for a long time to come. May I thank you for your attention. Spasiba большое.